Gabriel is out there. Talon is getting more powerful. They need to be stopped, and everything that we've suffered, everything that you've suffered, needs to be made good on. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. Anna crossed her arms. You can barely stand. You fainted in the street. The only thing you need to do is recover. Don't let this go. Don't be like the others. They dismantled everything we spent our lives building, and then they made us into villains. We're not all like you, Jack, Anna said. Some of us can move forward. This is moving forward, Jack growled. You're excited, Anna said. You're not thinking straight. Get some more rest. We can talk after. After? Jack's eyes flashed to his mug and then looked back at Anna. Did you? He collapsed on the cot. Anna waited until Jack was deeply asleep before she lifted his legs onto the bed, tucked a pillow up beneath his head, and pulled the scratchy blanket over him. He had scars she didn't recognize, and his hair had thinned and faded to a silvery white. While he slept, Soldier 76 slipped away, and she could feel the presence of the Jack she remembered. She picked up the empty mug and left him to rest. Later, Anna returned to the darkened complex, her supplies in a canvas sack she carried over her shoulder. With the lights off, the place felt more like a tomb than ever. She walked through the entry corridor and into the main chamber to find, of all things, Jack, shirtless, doing one-handed push-ups through gritted teeth. He'd discarded his bandages in a small pile on his cot. Anna could see the angry red and black of the wounded flesh, bound together by her inexpert stitching. You're going to tear those stitches out, Anna remarked. I was feeling a little restless, Jack explained. You did sleep for 2 days, Anna said. Hungry? I'd kill for a burger. Anna gave him a look of disbelief. But I'm not picky. Jack flashed her that smile he used to try to get himself out of trouble. He really was like a child sometimes. Anna pulled paper containers of food out of her sack and placed them on the low table in front of him. The rich smells drifted through the air. There was falafel and beans and pockets of freshly baked bread stuffed with steaming minced lamb meats and onions. It's not my cooking, at least. Thank God for small miracles, Jack chuckled. In spite of herself, Anna laughed as well. Jack attacked the food like someone accustomed to having to wolf down meals quickly. Anna helped herself to a little, but mostly they ate in silence. When they'd finished, Jack leaned back on the crate he was sitting on and settled back into his questioning. Why didn't you tell me you were alive? Jack asked. I don't know if you'll understand, Anna said. Gabriel would, but you're different in some ways. Jack's expression was unreadable. And Fariha? You let her think you were dead? That was the hardest part, Anna sighed. She stood up and walked over to her desk, where there was a small framed photo of Anna with her young daughter on her back. Their arms were both spread wide as though they were flying. Fariha would have expected Captain Amari to return, but she was gone. The moment I hesitated, I changed. You can't blame yourself, Jack said softly. How could you have known? Don't patronize me, Jack, Anna snapped. Of course it was my fault. It didn't have to haunt me for the rest of my life, but I can accept the blame. It wouldn't have made a difference to us. We'd have wanted you back. It turns out we couldn't do it without you, Jack said, touching her shoulder gently. Overwatch needed you, and now I need you. Anna read the desperation on Jack's face. Getting revenge for what happened won't accomplish anything other than getting you killed. Maybe, but I still have to fight. Everyone else gave up, but not me. He blames me too, Anna realized. Stubborn. You couldn't give up the fight either, Jack said. Why else were you at Hakim's palace? I tried to live quietly, you know. I would be near my daughter and be at peace, but the longer I lived here, the harder it was for me to escape the fact that we were responsible for what happened to the city. We shut down the Anubis project, and Egypt has never recovered. Anna stood up, turning her back to Jack. People's lives are hard. They're being taken advantage of by parasites like Hakim. How could I let it go on when I knew there was something I could do? You're fighting for justice, just like me, Jack said. Anna's eyes narrowed. Revenge isn't justice. Jack threw his hands up. We're after the same thing. Why do you think Hakim was meeting with Gabriel? He's working for Talon. The rot on the city is going to spread, and it will ruin the world just like it always does. Hakim runs a criminal organization that has strangled Cairo. The police and the government either turned a blind eye or they're being paid off by him. Food supplies aren't being distributed to people who need them. Medical care is almost impossible to get, Anna said. Look me in the eye and tell me you can leave without doing anything. Cairo and the world will suffer until we bring them all down. You have to see the bigger picture, Jack said heatedly. Are you even hearing yourself? You would never have made this argument before, Anna said disapprovingly. The way we do things matters. Times change, Jack said with finality. Either you're coming with me or I'm leaving. I've already wasted too much time. I'm not going, Anna said. For a long moment, Jack stared at her in silence. A sniper takes the most dangerous threat out first. That was your job. Jack picked up his ruined coat. If you want to waste your time on petty criminals, so be it. I have a war to fight. He stormed out. After Jack left, Anna switched on her computer. Jack had been using it earlier, and the screen was cluttered with articles about Reaper's movements and appearances. Anna wondered who had been supplying Jack with some of this information, but that was a puzzle for another time. She browsed through the reports and remembered the ruined face she had seen behind the mask.
What happened to you, Gabriel?
One of the articles indicated that casualties in one of Reaper's attacks had suffered the same sort of wounds as Jack. That damned scientist, Anna thought with disgust. The other information offered little new insight on the Reaper, providing only a view into Jack's mind. He was following a spider web of corporations, government officials, and financial institutions, all hopelessly tangled together through corrupt arteries and shady intermediaries. It was a sort of problem that was never Jack's strong suit. He preferred two sides, concrete facts and one clear, unequivocal decision. The messy stuff was always Gabriel's arena, not as much as it used to be. Anna considered her options. In her heart, she knew she wanted to say, Egypt was failing. In a few more years, it was likely that it would all fall into chaos, torn apart by profiteers and criminals like Hakim. As the bounty hunter Shrike, she had slowly been making a difference, little by little. If she left, all her work would be undone. But there are other people here, like Fariha. They're not helpless. It doesn't have to be you. That pride again. She looked back at articles about the vigilante Soldier 76. One caught her attention. A break-in at Lumerico's newest fusion plant. There had been a gunfight in the middle of the market. A number of serious injuries and property damage. All of it attributed to him. But there was also eyewitness testimony from a local girl in Dorado. Even though everyone else thought he was someone to fear, she had called him a hero. It doesn't have to be you, but sometimes people need something to believe in. Anna knew what she needed to do. She walked over to the makeshift shelf that had held the treasure she'd found in the necropolis when she'd first arrived. She looked at the feline face on the ancient mask. It was the goddess Bastet, a guardian. Jack walked through the sleeping city. The cool night air was a pleasant break from the heat of day. Given the late hour, the streets were quiet, even though he had wandered into the city center. The stalls selling food, scavenged omnic parts, or fabrics and textiles had long since shut down. Curfews weren't imposed, but the city's residents were advised to stay indoors after sundown for their own protection. After coming face to face with Reaper, the dark was a pool of shadows that hid the unknown. Jack had been on the hunt for some time now, gathering information and tracking what leads he had. He'd had the benefit of being unnoticed, but things had changed. There was no doubt that Talon and its allies knew he was coming for them. He had gotten one good night's sleep since he arrived in Cairo, and it was the first in as long as he could remember. I can't believe she drugged me, Jack thought. He was uneasy now. Staying in one place for too long was risky, especially now that Gabe would be looking for him. He had to move on. Night had crept towards morning, and a full moon was hanging lower in the sky when Jack finally returned. Anna was sitting at the computer as he entered. Come back for the rest of your things? She asked without looking up. He walked over to her. I'll help you capture Hakim. Once that's done, we go after Reaper. We have to make sure this city is secure, Anna corrected him. I'll only leave with you after things here are settled. That means not just Hakim, but his followers too. I need to know that the people will be safe. Jack's jaw clenched as he considered the offer. Then let's go over to his manor and round him and his men up, one quick strike before they have time to prepare. Anna shook her head. No rushing in. Remember how it went last time? It would have been fine if Gabe hadn't showed up, Jack said. Anna arched an eyebrow. Jack sighed. What's the plan then? We start at the bottom and work our way up. Close the net around Hakim, starve him of his resources, and force him out into the open. We have to expose him and the people that are protecting him. Understood? Jack sighed, relenting. You know, I told Gabe they picked the wrong person for Strike Commander. Yes, but you meant him, not me, Anna replied. Could have been Reinhardt. Jack smirked. Let's not be crazy now. Ever since the fight at his palace, Hakim had been reticent to return, instead moving between his safe houses in the city. Jack had been able to track down a number of them, and had found that one was most conducive to their plans. He rented an apartment that overlooked it. Anna and Jack hadn't bothered with niceties. The room was furnished only with a couple beaten-up wooden chairs and a wooden crate. They took turns with one sleeping bag. After the second day, Anna had insisted on bringing a hot plate so she could make tea. Within a week, they'd rounded up a number of Hakim's associates. whittling away at his organization. Word spread about someone targeting Hakim's organization. Whoever it was, people agreed. They meant to bring Hakim to justice. But after the initial burst, things had slowed down. Hakim went further underground. He was being more careful. There was nothing to do but wait. The boredom wasn't so bad for Anna. As a sniper, she had more than her share of patience. And having the freedom to move around, take naps, and even go outside made it more than tolerable. Jack was restless, though. She saw the way he looked out the window, searching the horizon endlessly, and Anna knew his gaze was fixed on one thing. Gabriel. Anything? Jack asked, glancing up. He leaned back in his chair in a way that would make a schoolteacher worried. There was nothing in his hand. No sign of Hakim. What are you looking at? Anna asked. Oh, just reminiscing about the old days. Jack passed over the small stack of photos. They were well worn, creased in places, and had obviously been Jack's companions for a long time. The top photo was a picture of them with Gabriel, all three looking young and optimistic, though Gabriel already showed signs of the stress of leadership weighing upon him. They'd just won a major battle in Rio de Janeiro. I remember the breach, Anna smiled. We look so serious in this picture. It's funny. That's why it's a great photo, laughed Jack. It's good to know he can still laugh. She turned to the next one and almost dropped the photos in surprise. She'd never seen the photo, but she recognized it immediately. Jack looked so much younger. He had just stepped off a military transport for leave. It was the other person in the figure that surprised her. A dark-haired man, dressed in a casual black button-up shirt. Jack's arm was around his shoulder. Vincent. Vincent. I haven't thought about him in years, Anna said, still keeping a candle lit for him. Jack shook his head. Nothing like that. You've never looked in on him? You must have been curious. All the surveillance power in the world. I bet Gabe would have put a Blackwatch agent on him if you asked. Jack glared at her. Okay, touchy subject. Jack laughed. He got married. They're very happy. I'm happy for him. Anna was unconvinced. In the early days, Jack talked about him often, floating a dream that the war would end quickly and maybe he'd have a chance to return to a normal life. But a normal life was never the reward for people like us. Vincent deserved a happier life than the one I could give him. Jack sighed. We both knew that I could never put anything above my duty. Everything I fought for was to protect people like him. That's the sacrifice I made. Relationships don't work out so well for us, do they? Anna said, unconsciously running her thumb over where her wedding ring used to be. At least you and Gabe managed to have families. The pair lapsed back into silence. Anna glanced out the window to see the familiar figure of Hakim entering the apartment block. It's him. Anna passed the photos back to Jack, who carefully slid them into the inside pocket of his jacket. Ready? Jack asked as he put his mask and targeting visor on, picking up his heavy pulse rifle where he had propped it against the wall. Anna took her own rifle, quite a bit more manageable than Jack's, and slung it over her shoulder. She clipped a few flashbangs to her belt and then retrieved the last item from her pack, the black and gold mask. You're bringing that? Jack asked. You inspired me, Jack. Soldier 76 is more than a vigilante. The world knows that name. Your enemies are afraid you'll find them. I don't want Hakim, Talon, or anyone else to plunge Cairo into chaos the second I'm gone. I'm putting on a new mask. Not a hunter this time. A protector. The kind of persona that I could leave behind to keep the people safe. Bastet. I just thought my mask was scary, Jack smiled. Bastet is scarier than an old lady. Anna, there's nothing scarier than an old lady, Jack said. You would know. 1 week later, Anna and Jack were packing up the Necropolis base. They'd leave much of Anna's belongings behind, taking only what they needed for the journey ahead. Hakim and his network of criminals had been dismantled. The news had started to report about the movements of a guardian named Bastet who had captured Hakim and exposed the extent of his crimes. Even the government was forced to act. What about these? Jack pointed at the shelf that had the Egyptian artifacts on it. I could barely manage carrying you, and you want me to bring all this, Anna said. It's well hidden. It will just wait here until I can find a proper caretaker. Fariha? Jack guessed. You talked to her? I left her a message, Anna said. You're sure you can leave things like this? It could be a long time before you see her again. If ever. Anna sighed. She never responded to my first letter. Jack winced. She'll come around in time. She loves you. Did you tell Sam anything? I will eventually. Maybe, Anna said. I made a big enough mess of his life without having to give him the news. None of us are very good at saying goodbye, are we? We're better than Reinhardt, anyway. I'm pretty sure his life is just one long attempt to avoid saying a goodbye. How is he? Anna asked. That's a long story, Jack said, but I suppose we'll have time. Anna nodded. There's something I want to be clear about before we leave, Jack, Anna said. I'm going with you, but I'm not convinced that this is a good idea at all. Talon, Overwatch, Gabriel. I already let them go. It hurt. She paused. When I first came to the necropolis, most of the artifacts I found were ruined. I saved what I could, but I had to leave the rest. That's what's most important, Commander. Don't call me that, Jack groused. And come on, we need to pay a visit to some old friends. They left the necropolis, sealing the entrance behind them. Long after they'd left, the relics of ancient civilizations laid in wait in the darkness of that dusty room. At the center of them all was a golden mask bearing the face of a goddess, just as it remained in the hearts of the people of Cairo and the fears of those who would harm them. A mask and a name.